Welcome back. Good to
Hello,
see you.
hello, everybody.
And today, this is Behind School Doors, where we discuss a lot of things that pertains to education and what I personally feel as an ex-teacher, parents should be able to know about what happens in the school system.
Hmm.
So today, I think today's going to be a very interesting and could be a very touchy topic. So disclaimer, please watch this at your own discretion because today we will be talking a lot about SA in school. So please be advised, like if this is a trigger for you, please don't watch it. Like we don't want anyone to get triggered by this topic because this topic can be very sensitive.
Exactly. So just take care of yourself. If you feel triggered, immediately stop and seek the help that you need in those situations, especially if you've been a victim of SA in the past.
Any violent crimes?
Yes, exactly.
Nice. So, today, with that disclaimer being said, we will be talking about inappropriate teacher behaviors. And I feel like growing up, especially for me, growing up in the US and being in school the majority of my life here in America, in my day and age, you didn't really hear a lot about inappropriate teacher student relationships. I feel like it wasn't until I started to get older, maybe around like sixth, seventh grade, you might hear one or two topics or one or
Yeah,
two cases.
yeah.
But nowadays, I feel like every other day or maybe every other week when I scroll through social media, there's something new throughout the US, a new case that's popping up about teachers being inappropriate with their students.
Do you think, though, it's just because we're publicizing it more, which is a good thing, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
Because here's why I say that. So I was born here in the United States, and to parents who were immigrants slash students, and then went to Zambia, and I went to school in Zambia, and I did see cases of abuse by some teachers.
But was it like inappropriate as far as physical touching, or was it more like, violent? Because, in other countries, corporal punishment is still a
It's a
thing.
mixture of both. Let me
Okay.
explain. Those teachers we knew in my middle school and high school. It's a combination of middle school and high school in Zambia. That's how they're combined.
Okay.
I won't mention the school. There was a teacher there who was very abusive, who had a number of kids with different students. But in Africa, in Zambia, because at the time, this was in the early 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. So at the time, it just wasn't enforced as much as it is today. Today, they're very aggressive against it. At the time, it was just like, oh, this happened. The family deals with it. So
Yeah,
the
so
family,
something's like swept underneath the
yeah,
rug.
the
It's
family
not
comes into play. I don't know whether there was money
broadcasting.
involved or however that worked, but there was no law enforcement. There was no prosecution. It's really like just family members
Just
and
deal with
people
it.
who deal with it.
And that's almost like to say, but what happens in a lot of families whenever an adult does end up, touching a child underage.
Yeah.
Shouldn't touch your family members anyways, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
It does get swept underneath the rug and
Yeah.
not completely ignored, but ignored where they don't want to bring any shame to the family or they don't
Yeah.
want to bring any shame or guilt to the school, right? And I mean, that's sad. And so, yes, like nowadays we see law enforcement is finally getting to the point where we definitely have to do something about this because this is not okay for an adult
Yeah.
to be interacting with a child and your student who's a minor in that manner.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, here's my question for you. It seems to be that if it's a male teacher, and if a child or a student who happens to be female or male, we take very aggressive action. That person's probably going to jail for 20, 30 years. I mean, look at that guy. What's his name? Jared? That
Yeah, so
yeah,
he did a child
yeah.
pornography.
Isn't he still in jail? Right? I think he's
He
still in
is
jail.
still
Yeah,
incarcerated.
I
He
think so.
is
Yeah.
subway
So
guy.
yeah. So if you think about it, that's the situation. But why is it that when it's a female abuser with a boy.
It's a slap on the
Like,
wrist.
it's a slap on the wrist, right?
It really is, and that's a
Yeah.
double standards in America.
Yeah.
As you know, can only speak about America right now, but that's a double standard here in this country. Is men are prosecuted more and more like the punishment is more harsh in
Yeah.
comparison to a female because as a female, women, quote unquote, predators are not taken as seriously because how can a woman be a predator? A woman's supposed to be looked at as being dainty and classy. As you know, we're not supposed to have those type of thoughts. We're the motherly, we're the nurturing ones. We're the ones who care. So why even think about a woman inappropriately touching a child, regardless of male or female? In comparison to a man and the way how they have it shed in the light in society is they're overly sexualized, predators, they're the ones who just always want to pounce, they always look for their prey. It's the truth. Because you mostly hear about men, the males, who are dominating or grooming younger children, regardless if it's male or female.
Yeah.
It's a double standard here in this country and a double standard that needs to be corrected because just how you have male predators out there, you have female predators as well.
Exactly. You remember that there was that female, what was her name? Mary, I think it was? She was involved.
Her 13-year-old student.
And they gave her a slap on the wrist at the beginning. And
she went back and so you didn't learn your lesson the first time. You went back and you did it again. Now you're pregnant by this child.
Yeah, and then they
and yes, he's a child. He was 13.
Yeah, sentenced her to jail for 7 years. She probably only served 2 to 3 years.
And then she got out.
She got out. She even got an interview on Larry King. Did you see that?
I think there's a Lifetime movie made after her as well. Like she got that publicity. They got married. I mean, she passed away now. They got married.
And the family, the family just looked the other way.
Because she's a woman.
They weren't even campaigning for her to be released. It was only the state that went after her aggressively.
Right.
Because they had to set an example. And I think the state did the right thing. I think the sentence should have been more severe.
Definitely.
Because, we should be able to say if it's a male, we would sentence them to 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And I don't see why, if you're a female, you go to jail for what? You end up only going to jail for 2 to 3 years after doing it twice.
And some of them, they probation for a certain amount of years. But once again, they're not really checking for the female teachers or female period as they are with men. But this also goes back to being a child, right? And growing up. As a girl child, I had to be sheltered a lot. You're not going outside. You're not sleeping over anyone's house. We are sheltered. But as a male, and I use my brother an example, it was push him out. He's a man. He needs to man up. He could go to anybody's house. And sex was introduced a lot earlier. You better hold on to your virginity, little girl, until you're married. Son, you know what you got to do because you're a man. So it's something that's ingrained from childhood. The difference between a male and female.
Yeah.
And it's always looked at as the male being the predators. But you have a lot of women predators. And then the women predators who prey onto the boys, once again, that is overlooked. Oh, she's teaching you how to be a man. She gonna help you grow up and be a man. But she's preying on this child. She's in her 20s and he's 13. She's in her 30s and he's 13. You know what I mean? Like,
in her 30s.
preying on this child. That child is young enough to be your child. Like, no, that's not okay. I was watching a video recently and I don't remember anybody's names because I'm not hip to, the younger culture like that. But it was of a male and a female. And the female groped him inappropriately in front of other children. And for him to actually stand up and say, this made him uncomfortable and, he was uncomfortable. It wasn't okay for her to grope him. And this is considered SA. Society's like, no, because you're a man.
That's crazy.
You're a man, so you're fine. She's a female. Now, if a female were to do it, oh my God. Either way, it's wrong. Either way. I'm sorry, like this has nothing to do with age. If somebody touches you inappropriately and you are uncomfortable, that is wrong. You could be the same age. It doesn't matter.
What happened to consent, right? Child has no way of consenting.
Right.
So you have to make sure that you keep the teacher-student relationship.
As the teacher-student.
As a teacher-student relationship. Now, you were a teacher. You have experience.
Yes.
I don't. So I have no idea, to be honest. Here's my question for you. What is the solution? How do you spot these predators? Because
It's crazy
like, how do you
because
spot them? Especially because it seems to be like the female ones are very common nowadays. I see them in the news all the time.
yes, but how do you? Because in reality, you cannot.
Yeah,
It's very hard to spot a predator.
Yeah.
And sometimes we could think that we're spotting a predator and that person is not the predator.
Yeah.
But we go off based off of what society says a predator looks, sounds, acts like. That person could just be a loner minding their business. The predator could be the person who's at the top of the class or the principal, whoever.
Yeah.
Nobody's paying attention to that. But they're paying attention to this, this teacher or whoever that maybe they have a really close relationship with the child, but they're not touching the child. They look at the child as their child.
Yeah.
I'm helping them. So in order to spot a predator, I think that's very difficult. Yeah. Have I seen and witnessed inappropriate teacher-student behaviors and relationships? Yes, some things was a little bit alarming and concerning. Yeah. And it came from both parties, male and female, but I'm not going to lie. I personally witnessed it more with the men being, and not necessarily saying the men were being 100% inappropriate, but you have these little girls who are built differently and they're flaunting and showing things that when we were younger, we didn't. And with the food and whatnot, you have all these hormones, so they're just out there. And, what they wear to school, sometimes the teachers are looking like, yeah. And sometimes you're like, hold on, are you looking at that child like that's inappropriate or are you lusting after that child?
It's very difficult to tell, though. Here's a situation. Here's what my issue is with that, right? It's very difficult to differentiate between someone who's looking and shocked and saying, this is so inappropriate, and somebody who is like, oh, wow, that person, look at that. Like the Jared star, right? So we don't want to have moral panics where we go after wrong people, which happened. There were cases after the mid-90s in the United States. Everybody was a predator, and they ended up going after the wrong ones, and it was just
that happens. So, yeah, that happens. Like I remember in a situation, kind of piggybacking off of what I was saying, where a teacher, right, he was accused of looking at girls specifically inappropriately, too close to them, like why they always come into your classroom. Once again, he was more of a father figure to these girls. And some of these girls were like, oh, well, I feel uncomfortable around so-and-so.
Yeah.
Here's a teacher who, because he's male, he always kept his classroom door open.
Yeah.
He always made sure that whenever a child needed help or the child will come to the classroom, he would say, you need to go get a friend.
Yeah.
Because he did not want that stigma to be placed on him.
Yeah.
So he was protecting himself as a male teacher.
Yeah.
Especially with some girls, it's not all, but sometimes you do have girls where they might misconstrue what a teacher might say or how a teacher might look at them or, whatever, as it being advances.
Yeah.
When a lot of times it's really not advances.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about women predators, once again, like that's even more difficult because nobody's looking at a woman teacher to even think about.
Yeah, because the thing is, and to be honest, we men created that society.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you said it.
Yeah, we created that society that is dominated, that is paternalistic and all that, and misogynistic. And so we created this society, and now we have to bear the side effects of it.
Because now you're realizing, you're witnessing that there's so many female predators. I want to say woman and female at the same time. Yes, female. Female predators out there.
Yeah.
I mean, so I was looking online. In 2022, there's 349 teachers arrested for child-related sex crimes, and that's according to Fox News.
Oh, my goodness.
349. What? Teachers. I mean, I don't really know how much of those were male compared to female, but that's 349 teachers in the U.S. alone, and that's in 2022. That's wow. That's an alarming number. One is an alarming number.
Yeah.
That is alarming. It also said that women get 60% less jail time than men and are 75% more likely to receive probation instead of jail.
That's crazy.
How?
I think what it is we created this kind of a society that looks at women as motherly figures, which is a good thing. But then we have also created a society where Movies always show a man being a predator,
Always.
and rarely does it show a female being a predator. I do think that the solution might be to create some sort of a blind system.
There needs to be.
And I would even recommend, there's AI based judgments where you put the information in and then the AI will determine what sentence to do. And I think what should happen is, for the counties and the cities and the states that's testing out the AI system of judgment, I would use it in this situation. There are some situations where it's seen as biased, but in this situation, I think I would use it. I think that's my way of reducing that gap, is to say, don't put the sex of the person. Don't even put the name. Sometimes even change the name and to a gender neutral name, so that the AI can't guess if it's a male or female. And then put the numbers in there and then look at the sentence and then just say, this is a crime committed. The person has been found guilty of this crime. What sentence should they get? And that's the sentence that person will get.
The thing is, in America, there needs to be a standard sentence for any form of SA with a minor and someone who's older. Because a lot of times it's like situational, circumstantial, and a lot of people just don't get justice. I feel like once you touch a minor in an inappropriate way, there has to be a sentence. Once you do something that's maybe a little bit more, it needs to be a different sentence. Like, it goes on the levels. Regardless if you're male, female, or whatever gender it is that you identify with, once you as an adult pass the 18 plus, you touch someone inappropriately, 17, okay, I know some states are 16 or whatever, but 17 to 16 and below, you're going to jail. And there's no such thing as probation. There's no such thing as home arrest. You're going to prison. That's how I feel. But let's kind of teeter off of this subject for a quick minute. Still focusing on inappropriate behaviors or interactions, right? You heard about that story about the young male teacher, black male teacher, who had his students take out his braids at school. And he made a TikTok he put online, right? But he had braids, and he had a few female students taking his braids out at school. What do you think about that?
That's inappropriate. Now, should it be judged as SA? No.
Sorry.
But it is inappropriate, and that teacher probably should be fired.
Was fired.
Because that's inappropriate. I wouldn't call it SA. And this is where we should be careful, because there's a difference between a person just being inappropriate in a sense of lack of professionalism and a person being SA, right? We should treat those two things differently. So a very good example, if a teacher, you talked about somebody looking at somebody a certain way. Looking should not be a way to tell if somebody's done something. There has to be absolute evidence, because your life is going to be messed up if they find you guilty of this crime. So it better be that there's absolute evidence that the crime was actually committed. We've seen you sent inappropriate pictures. We've seen we saw you touch a person in a part of a body that there was no way that it can't be SA. That's how I look at it.
So you think that he should have been fired?
Fired, yes.
So what about a teacher who didn't have children take his hair out, but the girls decorated his hair, did his hair in the classroom? Should he have been fired as well?
I do think so. I think, let me explain what I mean.
Like thinking of taking SA out of it, just thinking about inappropriate interactions between teacher and student.
It's inappropriate for a teacher and a student to interact in that way. And I understand being friendly with the people you're teaching and having some sort of playful relationship is great. But, our society has really changed. And I think we've decided as a society that children have to be protected by all means necessary.
My next question is, so as a female teacher, because those two teachers are male teachers, and that's like an example of students doing their teacher's hair, two male teachers. Now, as a female teacher, your students come in and they put pigtails in your hair. Is that inappropriate?
If you're permitting them to do that.
See, now there's a double standard. Because these teachers who are male teachers permitted the children to play in their hair.
And
as a female teacher, your students are going to play in your hair. That's a double standard.
Yeah.
Should he have, in my opinion, should he have been fired? No. Should he have been suspended? Yes.
Okay. I see what you mean.
And I'm saying that because was it inappropriate?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And this is me coming from a teacher standpoint because I understand when a student wants that connection with an adult.
Yeah.
I do my students hair.
Yeah.
And people be like, oh, that's because you're motherly.
Yeah.
That's because when my students come inside my classroom and their hair looks some type of way, I'm going to make sure that I fix their hair. If me and my students, we have some downtime and we're playing.
Yeah.
Okay. I taught 6th grade last year.
I see. You know
my
what?
students,
You
so
explained
is that inappropriate?
That's
For me
the
and my
question.
students to have that connection. I'm not getting naked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is not, we're having fun. We're connecting. The thing that he did wrong was put it online and maybe not actually take his hair out because
Yeah.
this they're not your stylist. But suppose they were like, oh, let me put some little clips or beads on it. That right there would have been deemed as funny.
Yeah.
But it became inappropriate because he had them take his hair out.
So now that you've explained it,
Right? But don't you see the double standard in this country? So that's almost like the way how it is whenever you have a
okay.
male predator and a
Okay.
female predator.
All right. I totally understand you. Now that you've said it that way, right? I'll change my mind. I think it shouldn't have even been. I think it should have been just a reprimanded. It should have been reprimanded for putting it on TikTok. I think not because he did it,
Exactly.
but putting it on TikTok. Don't put it on
Exactly.
TikTok because the public may see it
And
as
everybody
something
takes it out
out of context. So it's okay for you to kind of try and have that kind of a close relationship with your students because you want your students to learn properly. You don't want it to be like a military-like where disciplinarian sort of style.
Yeah, it's like
The problem is, I think, you're right. We want students and teachers to be close to each other in a way so the learning is much better.
Yes,
So
it
there's
is.
you don't fear your teacher or you don't see your teacher as some sort of a robot or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you actually respect them, and at the same time, because you respect them, you're trying to do the best you can in your classes and whatever
And
you
you're built,
start.
these children are with you 180 days at least throughout the school year, right?
Yeah.
They're with you more than they are with their parents. And a
Yeah.
lot of these students, they come from different homes. Not every student comes from a broken home, but also not every student comes from a nice, well-balanced home. And sometimes these students really want an adult who they can trust, who they
Yeah.
can bond with, because sometimes, this is not all, listen to the words, sometimes they don't get that with who they live with, yes, that they live with at home.
That is true.
So this is all you have, is school. Now, when it comes to the young gentleman, once again, he shouldn't have done it. And
Yeah.
he shouldn't have put it online. And if you were going to have hairdresser day at school, communicate that with the parents. But again, you put it online, so now you have the entire world going to chastise you and not understand where you're coming from as an educator. Because a lot of people, if you're not an educator, you will not understand what it means to be an educator, what it means to be that positive role model in the life of your students, especially whenever you're working in certain demographics.
That's true. I agree.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I want people to open their eyes and understand the double standards that are in this country.
I do think that it's important. I think there's something missing when the relationship between a teacher and student becomes, I'm afraid, one of fear that I could be accused of something. So I'm just going to be...
Imagine walking on eggshells.
I do think that there has to be a line drawn where it says, okay, no touching.
Yes.
Obviously, no touching, like inappropriate touching.
Yes.
And we can tell, we know when it's inappropriate touching.
Yes.
And we know when it's not.
Right.
For example, you fixing the student hair, obviously that's not
That's not
inappropriate.
appropriate.
And so we can tell when it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
So, absolutely.
When a child enters a classroom, some teachers, I know I did, different high fives, different handshakes. Some students, they want a hug. I saw a video of a teacher kissing students on the lips. That's inappropriate.
Oh, no. That's inappropriate.
That's inappropriate. When they come, no, thank you.
The problem, though, is that we have to be able to tell when it was just a misunderstanding and when it was right?
Yes.
So let me give an example. Let's assume that a student, that a teacher is coming from a country where relationships between people of the same sex tend to be very, very touchy. Right? This happens in different cultures. For example, relationships between women tend to be very, very touchy because we don't assume anything is going on. They're
Right.
not like here in America where we have a lot of, we have lesbian relationships and all that. There they have it. And so and gay relationships. And so we see a teacher tag a student in a certain way and they come from another culture. I think we should be able to look and say, hey, what's the culture of this person? Where are they coming from? Why did they do that? Before making conclusions.
Right.
And I think it's important also to educate people about the culture here so that they understand that maybe touching is not appropriate.
Right.
You know, for example, in countries in Japan, any form of touching is very restrictive. And what I mean is, in Japan, you bow to your teachers, you do all that. So anybody who's even touching, even hair, that's an absolute no-no. You know, in Japanese, dame. Japanese would say, you know, it's not okay.
At all.
And so that's how their culture is. So in Japan, because their culture is not a very touchy culture, I think cases of abuse are far, far less because it makes it very, very difficult to, because obviously if you touch, they are going to assume it's abuse. So if you're an American teacher who goes to Japan, and let's say you're found to be touching his feet.
You want to hug the student?
Yeah, hugging. I think the Japanese educational system in that situation should say, okay, you know what, let's take you aside and let's explain what the Japanese culture is like.
Right.
It shouldn't be like, oh my God, you abusing students. So the same thing applies in America, right? So it should be a case-by-case basis, making a judgment call. Why did you do that? Why did you touch the student that way? Now, it's circumstantial evidence, isn't it? This is where we look at evidence. So it's not just touching, it's do we have what's going on? Cell phones, private cell phones with that student? That's a no-no, right? Anything inappropriate, send it. Oh yes, definitely. We have absolute evidence that you did this. So these things are very, very important. And the question is, how do we handle this? It's very, very difficult. But I think also another problem we have now in where I originally came from, my sister was telling me that, because my sister's in the educational system, and she was telling me that now the system has changed. And so a lot of times there's a lot of sex education for both students and the teachers.
Which that's really good.
What is appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I think that's very good, right? And I think that should be done more in America.
I agree.
Because we have a purity culture, puritanical culture, where anything to do, we even have states that saying we shouldn't even be discussing anything to do with sex with kids. And the question is, okay, if you don't discuss that, how are they going to know when abuse is occurring, right?
Yeah.
How are they going to know? How is a child going to know?
But the thing is also in America, you have a lot of teachers, educators who find that subject to be very touchy and they don't want to be the ones to teach that to children.
Yes, so
there's a lot of pushback with certain things in this country.
Oh, yeah, because they have a puritanical,
right? And a lot of parents won't even do it with their children. A lot of parents won't. So because as you said, you said puritanical. A lot of parents are like that. They don't want their children to be exposed to certain things, right? And when they do become exposed to certain things in school, because it's school, you have children who's coming from all different walks of life, coming inside a classroom from all different backgrounds and experiences. So when it is brought up in a certain case, the parents are like, wait, what? They're learning this in school. It's not necessarily from the teachers. It could be from other students. Just for a quick one, sexuality is one, right? They don't teach about sexuality. And I know there's a lot of teachers and religious folks who are very against sexuality being taught in school. But what happens whenever a child is exposed and a parent doesn't want that child to be exposed? That's one of the biggest questions. And it's like, in reality, let's be real. Let's be for real. In reality, you cannot shelter your child from everything because it's going to come out. So for an example, I was teaching 4th grade one year and some of the kids are really exposed and some children are really sheltered. So one of the more exposed children looked at this little girl and said, oh, well, you're a lesbian. And all the other kids started laughing. I found this out because somebody came to me after lunch and told me. So a little girl, you're not going to say her name or anything, but she came to me and she said, Miss, what does that word lesbian mean? And I was taken aback because here I am teaching fourth grade, and I know a lot of students who do understand sexuality at that age.
Yeah.
You do have children who are learning about themselves at that age. It's 10 years old around. To each their own, not saying anything. But I looked at her and I said, that's something I want you to go home and ask your parents. Because me as a teacher, and I know this child's parents, and because of certain things, I don't want to say something that's a parent that probably doesn't want their child to know, and something that could potentially cause me my job.
Yeah.
So my mother did come in, and the mother was quite upset. Yeah. He's a minister at this church and whatever. Yeah. And she said, I tried to shelter my daughter from that. And I looked at her and said, your daughter goes to a public school. Your daughter's a part of this real world. Your daughter's a part of this city. I said, this is life and your daughter's going to know about it. I said, me personally, I did not want to be the one to explain that to her, especially since I know who you are. I was like, I'm going to respect your family or whatever, but your daughter's going to be exposed to a lot more. I'm not saying you have to expose your daughter to everything. That's at your discretion as a parent. But if parents actually set their children up, you don't have to explain everything. Certain things, if you set your child up to understand, they will be able to navigate this thing that we call life and world. That's a little bit easier because you cannot shelter your child from the world, especially not this day and age with all these daggone cell phones and everything is right at the tips of their fingertips. Boop, they can find anything.
And the other thing is what I noted. For me personally, I happen to have had parents who have very, very open-minded.
Oh, yeah.
And so he learned about sex education when we were very young. And so when I was going to elementary school, there was a teacher who tried to lie when I was in primary school, called it primary school over there in Zambia. And she was lying about how pregnancy happened. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no. And she looked at me, she's like, oh, that's not how it happens. It's interesting. And so I was able to... And then she got really mad with my parents, and my parents were like, "We teach our children. If you don't like it, too bad." And so my thing is that as I've grown older, is that I've realized more information is better than telling people how to handle information is much better than less information and hoping that they'll handle it appropriately when they get exposed to that information. And in that situation that you mentioned about that child, I feel sorry for that child because she got exposed to a word, just a word, and that affected the whole system. And thank goodness he didn't have to deal with that. You were in a state where you probably would have been protected regardless, I think. But some states, when I mention it, like Florida, you would have been. Ooh.
Oh yeah, Florida at this point in time is a whole separate country.
It would have been. You found yourself in a lot of trouble, even if you didn't say anything, right? So a lot of times, I think people need to I think there needs to be a certain amount of openness. About
certain things, right?
Yeah,
so I'm going to give another example. I was teaching kindergarten, right?
Yeah.
And so this happened, it's linear because it's 2 separate years, but I had a sibling and then I had her younger brother the following year. So it'll come together. So 1 year teaching kindergarten, I had this little girl, once again, I don't mention names. I had this little girl and her mother came to me early school year and said, Miss, I want to let you know that my daughter has been aided by a family member. Now this family member is a teenage boy and she was 4. God, Jesus. Right?
Wow.
And so she came inside the classroom and she had her own issues. And now these issues are starting to manifest in my classroom, these behaviors. So the thing is, I had her right by my desk. So say my desk is right here. My desk is right here, right? Her desk is right here. And she has her back towards the class, but her face is facing me. So whenever I'm sitting at the desk and we're doing work, I'm able to be right next to her because she's difficult. And then I could still keep my eye on the other kids in the classroom. She started to do things in the classroom that were inappropriate based off of what she went through. Right? So it got to the point where my class became very sexualized in kindergarten. So our kids were pulling their pants down, showing each other their private parts, not necessarily in my classroom, but like I would bring them to lunch and they're inside the bathroom. And I mean, I actually went off on one of the lunch staff and I said, you cannot allow 5 children to go to the bathroom and they're 5 years old. Kindergartners to go to the bathroom at the same time and no one's watching them. Because when I went in there, I found 3 girls in the stall naked. So we had to have this whole entire classroom discussion and bring parents in one at a time and explain to them, something happened to a child in the classroom and she's starting to exert certain behaviors. And so because these are children who they're going home and they're doing inappropriate things around their family, or they're telling their parents what's been going on inside the classroom. I had one parent blame it on me, and I was like, you could blame it on me, but it's not me. I cannot. I'm one person.
Yeah.
There's 22 children. I can try my best, but they're not doing things inside my classroom like that. They're doing it outside of my classroom when they're not with me. But things started to happen in the classroom sexually that had to get rectified. We had to have, you know what I mean? And so then that was a huge thing. Like, what do you do when children are exposed to something so early and it happens in school? Things happen in school. Like, these are things that you can't control, but this is life. The following year, I ended up having her little brother. And now, same thing, the mother came to me and she said, my son is a little bit different. She said, but I love my son and I embrace him. But because I know he's different, I don't want them to bully him. Now, let me tell you, my little boo-boo, he always stood his ground. He was very feminine. And even in kindergarten, I had this other boy and he was trying to be his bully. It's like, I'm going to punch him. He was hefty too. I call him roly-poly. He was diesel for a little 5-year-old boy. I'm going to crush him. Why does he act like a girl? All this stuff. My little boobop, he did act very feminine, what you call feminine. Yeah. And so you had a lot of adults who were like, oh, he must have been touched too. He must have been SA'd. All this stuff must have happened to him. Why is he acting like that? Yeah. So now here comes a little boy who has more what's considered female characteristics. Yeah,
it's a female because technically for me, I don't believe like male characteristics. That's kind of...
Yeah, but society-wise, regardless.
These things.
Right. So he comes from that same household. Yeah. You know what I mean? We don't really know what happened to him, but these children are already exposed to this. So how do they expect a teacher to navigate, or a school to navigate in situations or circumstances like this when life actually happens in kindergarten?
And I'm glad you're exposing these things, because a lot of times these things are hidden. Nobody talks about these things because we don't want to deal with the difficult subjects. And one of the things that irritates me, and in the future we'll talk about this, we'll talk about other issues. I talk about it a lot in schools, in churches.
Yes.
What drives me nuts is the failure to confront difficult subjects.
Yes.
We have a difficult subject. We need answers for this difficult problem. Let's work together and find the solution to this difficult subject.
Right.
What happens if one child has been abused by another child? Because these things happen, and they happen more frequently than we think. I know this because when I grew up as a young person, I saw this at least twice, not directly, but indirectly. I knew of those situations where one kid abused another kid. Okay, so what do we do in those situations? We need to know. We can't just say, oh, well, when it happens, we'll deal with it. That's the problem. That's the issue I have. I will say this, and it's going to be a rant, and I'm pretty sure people who support the Florida thing are going to come after me. That's fine. I'll say this is the problem I have with Florida. I understand what you're trying to do. I get it. But deal with the difficult questions. Don't try to circumvent the difficult questions and say, we'll deal with it later. All right? Deal with the difficult questions. Now, what happens when this happens? So that teachers know what to do when they're faced with those situations, and they're not like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Exactly.
I'm going to try to ignore the problem and hope it goes away, right?
Because trust and believe, it won't go away. It will not go away unless you deal with it. And that's one thing that I really stood firm about. We have to deal with it. If we have to bring the parents in and have this, parents and students, and have this big collective meeting about what's going on inside this classroom, we're going to do that. You know what I mean? Because it's life. This stuff happens.
Yes.
There's another situation where two boys, they were in second grade. Yeah. Two boys, they were in the classroom. There was actually a substitute teacher in the classroom, and they were behind the bookshelf. This is a substitute teacher, first and only day inside this classroom. These kids are behind the bookshelf, and they're enjoying each other.
That's crazy.
So this is something that at least one of the boys witnessed that on home, on television, on a phone. And yes, they brought it to school. And so now in that situation, in that circumstance, yes, the substitute teacher should have had a better eye on them. Of course. Hands down. But at the same time, this issue happened. What do we do? Honestly, who can we blame in this situation? That's the thing.
But here's the problem.
And what do we do? Do we get mad at the school? Do we get mad at the substitute teacher? Do we get mad at the parents? Do we get mad at the children? Or is it something that we have to figure out as a collective in this country, how to handle these difficult conversations, these difficult topics, these difficult things that actually happen in real life?
Here's my other issue, right? So let me say this. Here's the other issue. What would happen? That teacher goes and reports this and says, oh my God, this is what's going on. What do you do now, right? You're a teacher. You don't want to get in trouble, right? Because maybe if you intervene, you could be accused.
Oh, yeah.
So you teacher, you're like, what do I do here? So what do we do in those circumstances, right? Mm-hmm. What do we do? Do I say, oh, I'm going to intervene? And no, I'm not going to directly intervene because I don't want to get in trouble.
Yes,
I'm probably going to just scream. I'll tell you, I personally would say, hey, somebody come here. Hey, something going on in the classroom. Yeah. I'll probably be calling people to attention, or I'll probably sneak out of the classroom secretly. No, seriously, that's what I would do personally. I'll sneak out secretly and call people in charge, someone in charge, maybe a senior teacher. I don't know how it works in schools and all that. Somebody, especially somebody who's female.
I would say it's a matter of contacting a school psychologist, a counselor, social worker, people who are equipped to deal with those type of issues whenever they do arise.
It's problematic because what do you do?
Because these things happen more often than we think.
Yes, and we don't know what to do in those circumstances. I'm very proud of my parents, may they rest in peace, that they taught us this when we were kids. Because by teaching us these things, we just knew how to navigate it. And then at the time there was HIV/AIDS.
Oh, yeah,
that freaked me out. Because my mom had this book, which had all the sexually transmitted diseases.
Oh, wow.
And so one time she sat with us and she was showing us this is what happens. And we were like, oh,
yes, I mean,
freaked out.
That's what parents should do. Yeah. That's exactly what parents should do. I'm thinking, like, in school, did I ever, Lord have mercy now. In school, I think I went to a Catholic school, and I don't want to be stereotypical, but I will say, typically, I was kind of cautious when I would go to confessions with the priest.
Oh, my.
I definitely, you know what I mean? Like, just because of what I've heard growing up, and also because of how I felt. I had a male gym teacher who I never felt any way around. If I see him in the streets, that's still my homie. Like, that's my gym teacher from kindergarten to 8th grade. You know what I mean? Had a custodian.
Yeah.
He looked like Mr. Clean, the bald head, the buff guy, and never felt any type of way around him. And I never felt any type of way around my female teachers. I did feel one type of way around he was my 7th grade teacher. He was weird. He was strange, and everybody did. Yeah. But also, same thing, like my parents also put to me aside. So I think we should wrap this up now.
It's really good, actually, by the way. This is good.
So, I mean, stay tuned for the next part. This is a
very sensitive.
Topic.
We're sorry if we triggered you. Hopefully, you heard the warning at the beginning. But, hopefully you all learned something. Parents, teachers, those people. Most of you have children who are in school. Learn something. Learn to navigate this situation.
It's a very, very tricky
and just educate. And more information, the better. Be prepared for the worst. And that's what I would encourage you. Just be prepared for the worst. Be prepared for every possibility. You could have a child who's really disciplined and sheltered. You send them, you think, I'm going to send them to a Christian school and they're never going to be exposed. And guess what? They still get exposed. You send them to some faith school because there's always someone who has a family that, I'm sorry to use the word, but some deviant family. And, we don't know. And you can't tell until it's too late.
Yes.
So just prepare your children. And that's
prepare yourselves.
Prepare yourselves as well.
Definitely do. But yes, I'm happy that we did this one. And of course, we will definitely talk about this at another time, get a little bit deeper. But yes, this was a lot. This was a lot. This was a lot. But I felt like it was necessary because we don't have these conversations enough. But until next time, this is Behind School Doors.